begin the current Daf, Mesechta Taanis Daf, begin 4 lines down from the top of the Amid. The Gemara continues to explain the halacha of Mishnah, which was discussing the mamadis and the source and the reason for this halacha. Shis corresponds by Tazich and Cheskel Taanis Daf. B'Shem joining us for today's Daf. Some things we're going to discuss in today's Daf are mishmaris / mamadis, which correspond to the mishmaris of Kan Levim, that they split up the Yisraelim in the same way. Navim Rishayim were the earlier prophets, David and Shmuel, regarding the takanas they made of the mishmaris. Carbon tzibur is carbon is brought by the entire Klal Yisrael from the shkalim that they would each give, and hence they were the owners of the carbon. Machlokes of ikashir b'peh, ikashir b'kli. Ikashir b'peh means to say that the primary shiur that the Levim is saying was with their mouth, and therefore the instruments were not considered as kli kodesh. Whereas ikashir b'kli holds that the primary shiur was with the instruments. And askara is a type of a disease that there's a constriction in the throat, and therefore it's difficult to breathe. Which is any pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't stop, we're not supposed to stop over there. That's the famous shmuz by Vayechulu, when we say, we're not supposed to say like a half of a pasuk. So begin the current Daf Chozayin, 4 lines down on the top of the Amid. The Mishnah had said, Elohein mamadis. These are the mamadis, because we spoke about that there were 3 times a year, that 4 times a day, the Kahanim Noisin is Kapayim, and one of them was the mamadis. So it says, what's the mamadis? Because it says, command the Jewish people, etc. So the Gemara says, my ka'amar. So what was the Mishnah saying? You're asking what's mamadis, and you bring up pasuk as korban lachmi l'ishai. What do you see from there? So Hachikama says the Gemara, this is what the Mishnah was saying. Elohein mamadis, that these are the mamadis that we're going to mention later on. And matam tiknu mamadis. What's the reason why they instituted mamadis? Lafisha, because it says in the pasuk, "Mamid b'tzavis b'nei Yisrael b'ma'atel," command the Jewish people, and you should tell them as korban lachmi l'ishai, the carbon of my bread for my fires. Now, the problem is, v'heich korban shaladim karev. How could a person's carbon be brought? But it is not standing over there. So so the earlier prophets, they instituted Esther Ma'abah Mishmar is 24 groups. I'll call Mishmal on every single group. There was a station in Yerushalayim, Shal Kahanim, Shal Levim, Shal Yisraelim. So you have all of Klal Yisrael, at least a representation of all of Klal Yisrael. The Gizman Mishmal Lalas, when it came time for the Mishmal to go up to the base of Mikdash, Kahanim, Levim, Yerushalayim. So the Kahanim Levim will go up to Yerushalayim, etc. That's what the Mishnah was coming to tell us when we were going to spell out when there's different times when they do the mamadis. So we were saying that what is the purpose of mamadis? It's coming to represent the Jewish people, that they're the owners of the carbon and that they should be there. Now, we mentioned that mamadis correlate to the way the mishmaris was split up. So we get into a discussion regarding the actual institution of this idea that we've mentioned in the past, that the Kahanim had mishmaris. Each week there was a different mishmar over 24 weeks. So what's the source and the etiology of this? Where does this come from? Termal in the Brisa. Esther Ma'abah Mishmaris be'Eretz Yisrael. There were 24 groups in Eretz Yisrael, and V'shtay Mesi b'Yericha, and 12 in Yericha, in Jericho. Says the Gemara, Shtay Mesi b'Yericha, there was 12 in Yericha, but then the Fish L'Tuva. Because, as Rashi explains, the Gemara initially understands this to mean that besides for the 24 in Yerushalayim, in the cities of Eretz Yisrael, there was 12 in Yericha, which would make for a total of 36. I thought there was only 24. Ella rather says the Gemara, no, Shteim Esri Mehen b'Yericha. 12 of the 24, half of them were in Yericha. Oh, so that comes to explain the Bryce and how were there 12 in Yericha. So as follows. Higiyaz man ha-mishmar. La'alois, when it came time for the mishmar to go up to Yerushalayim on Shabbos, they would divide the men of the mishmar. Chatzei ha-mishmar ha'ya'ila me'eretz Yisrael Yerushalayim. Half of the mishmar would go up from all the lands in Eretz Yisrael to Yerushalayim to do the avodah. The chatzei ha-mishmar, the other half of the mishmar, ha'ya'ila, and the Ger says li Yericha, would actually go to Yericha, which is near Yerushalayim, and there they would prepare that they could provide for the water and for the food for their brothers in Yerushalayim, and that's what they would do for all the 24 mishmaris. Comes out that half was in Yericha and only half was in Yerushalayim. Now, I'm reading Mishmul. He says, "Kam Levim Yisraelim." To have from these 3 sects of the Jewish people, Kam Levim Yisraelim, Ma'akvan Sakarbon holds back the validity of the carbon. Meaning, if you don't have a maimed from all of them in Yerushalayim, as the Mishnah taught on every single mishmar there was a man from Ka'am Levim Israelim, because since Israelim are the owners, and so too Ka'am Levim, so you need to have that all of them should be there by the Avodah. However, Masnita Tan in the Bryce we learned a slightly different version. Rabbi Shimon Lazar, he says, Kahanim Levim v'klei shir ma'akim b'sakarbon. He says the Ka'am Levim and the instruments are ma'akim b'karbon tzibur. So what is this machlekes between this teaching of Shmuel and this Bryce of Rabbi Shimon Lazar? So the Gemara explains, which this is a machlekes really Masechta Sukkah and Daf Nun, and also in Erechin is explicit in Daf Yud Aleph, regarding the shira that was done by the Karbanis. Marsa Shmuel held ikashida b'peh. The primary song was with their voices, and the instruments were there just to accompany and to harmonize. Now, since there's already Levium, so you don't have to have the instruments. So therefore Shmuel said, no, Kahan Levium Yisraelim, he didn't mention the Kli Shir. But a Marsa of Shimon Lazar held ikashida b'kli. The primary shir was with the instrument, with the flute, which is brought over there in Per Khalil in Masechta Sukkah. And therefore he says, ma'akim the carbon is going to be the Kahanim, Leviim, and the Kli Shir. Now, regarding this evolution and regarding how it was ultimately divided into 24 groups, the Gemara has a discussion. Amar Rav Chama bar Guya Merav. He says that Moshe tikkun lam liyisrael shmein mishmaros. Moshe Rabbeinu, he started this whole thing. He divided the Kahanim into 8 groups. Abba Me'elazar, we know the sons of Aaron HaKohen was Elazar and Isamar, because Nadav and Avihu passed away. So he had 4 groups from Elazar, from the sons of Elazar. He divided them into 4 groups, which Rashi says that this is a tradition that they had. Vidal and Isamar, and 4 groups from Isamar. But Shmuel, later on in history, when Shmuel Navi came along, he came with Midnal Sheshes, so he divided the Kahanim into 16 groups. And then David, the next generation David came along, but Midnal Esem Rabba, he divided them into 24 groups. Like says the Pasuk in Yom Aleph. In the 40th year of the kingdom of David, the reign of David, and they looked into this. They found in them Gibori Echal, the mighty warriors, Beyazer Gilad, and if one looks over there, one will see that there was a list of 24, which correlates to the 24 Mishmaris that the Kahanim was split up into. However, on this version of Rav, the Gemara asked Meisver from a Brisa. A Brisa seems to contradict Rav. The Brisa says, Moshe Tikkun Yisrael, Moshe instituted for the Jewish people Shmein Mishmaris, 8 groups. Abba Me'elazar, Abba Me'samar, that's the same thing like Rav had said, 4 from Elazar, 4 from Me'samar. But the next part, but David v'Shmuel, David and Shmuel came along, which they were at the same time, V'midan al Esrim v'Arba, and they made it into 24 groups. Like says the Pasuk in Yom Aleph. Yisa David u'Shmuel haraya. This was instituted by David and Shmuel, the visionary, be'emunasem, with their faithfulness. So that refutes Rav Chama. He said Shmuel made them into 16, and David made them into 24. Where here we see from the Brisa that no, both of them together made it into 24. Not the way Rav Chama said that first to see he made it to 16 and then David made it to 24. Says he, well, no, it's not a contradiction. This is what the Brisa is saying. From the foundations of David and Shmuel Ramasi, they made it into 24, meaning from the foundation that was done in the previous generation of Shmuel, who came from Ramot, that he made it to 16. David built on that and added on another 8, which we seem to be going in numbers of 4 and 8. He made it into 24, but it's not a contradiction. It first went to 16, then it went to 24. However, Gemara does bring Tanya to learn another brisa, that Moshe tikkun lahem liyisrael sheish eser mishmaros. Unlike whatever we said up until now, Moshe didn't make 8 mishmaros; he made 16 mishmaros. Shmoin Elazar, Shmoin Meisama, 8 from Elazar and 8 from Meisama. But when the sons of Elazar increased quantitatively more than the sons of Isamar, Chilkum, then he divided them. And he made a total of 24 mishmaros. Moshe Rabbeinu, like it says the pasuk in Yom Aleph. They matzu, and they found Bnei Elazar were drabim l'roshei gebarim. They found that the sons of Elazar were more for the heads of the mighty ones, min Bnei Isamar, more than the sons of Isamar. They chalkum and then divided them. LeBnei Elazar, to the sons of Elazar, roshim lebeis avos, where they had the heads of their families, where Shisha Asa was 16. LeBnei Isamar, lebeis avos, and for the sons of Isamar, for the household of their fathers, were Shemaim, there were only 8. So they ended up having this lopsided, Elazar having 16 and Isamar having 8, which that total of 24. And it says in the next pasuk, Beis Av Echad Ochaz LeElazar, that the house of one father was held for Elazar, but Ochaz LeIsamar, and held was for Isamar, meaning what originally was held for Isamar was held now as it was originally, because they didn't increase any new families of Mishmaris for Isamar, whereas for Elazar they added another one. Now, so you see that first thing more explains my Ba'ima. Why do you have to bring two psukim to show this idea of explaining what this Bryce's opinion is, that Moshe Rabbeinu first made 8 and 8, which was 16, and he added another 8 for the sons of for Elazar. So he says, because V'chitame, if you're going to say that actually originally there was only 4 for Elazar and 4 for Isamar, which was what Rav Chama actually said, which is who we're asking on, and you're going to say that no, that no, originally it was 4 and 4. And just like they increased for the sons of Elazar, so do they increase for the sons of Isamar. Because Shmoina, when we say there was 8, but Me'ikara in the beginning, Arbahaba was 4. And however, the sons of Elazar increased more, because for Isamar, we only made it ultimately for 8. And Elazar, we made it for 16. But don't tell me that originally it was 8 and 8, and therefore wouldn't be difficult in Rav Chama. No, Tashmat, we brought another pasuk that said, Beis Av Echad Ochaz LeElazar, that one house was held more for Elazar, but Achaz LeIsamar, and Isamar remained. So obviously you see that this is how it always was for Isamar. So obviously the Moshe originally had instituted 16, because if you're saying Isamar is remaining with 8, it didn't increase to 8. He always had 8. So it means Elazar was 8, Isamar was 8, and then that was 16, and then they added on another 8 for Elazar. But one thing is, Shiyuvta did of Chama Barguria. It's obviously refuting him, because he said that Moshe Rabbeinu originally made only 4 and 4. And here we see that Moshe Rabbeinu made originally 8 and 8. Rav Chama Barguria says, you're right, but Tanoi, this Bryce is not like me. But there is the Bryce which we had mentioned before, which said clearly that Moshe Rabbeinu had instituted only 8 Mishmaros originally, 4 and 4, but not the Amerikai Tana, the Amishmaina. I'm saying like that Tana who said that Moshe Rabbeinu only made 8, not 16, and then even subsequently making it into 24. So Rabbi Machlekes exactly who and how was this made into the 24 Mishmaros as we know it today. So we're going to continue on this Mishmaros of the Kahanim. So that was originally when they were coming into the first Beis Hamikdash, that they had these 24, but what happened was, Arba Mishmaros Olam and Agayla. There was only 4 of the 24 Mishmaros that came up in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, when they came up from Golas Babel. The rest of the Kahanim didn't come up, because actually a lot of Jews stayed in Babel, and they didn't want to come up, and they even have historically, they show that some from the first Beis Hamikdash, that they, wherever they went to the world, they didn't come back with Ezra Sefer. So only 4 Mishmaros came up from the diaspora. They were Gedaliah, Chodem, Pashchur, Ve'imeh. Out of the 24, these 4 came back. So Amr Nevim Shebenaim, so the prophets amongst them that were there in the times of the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash, they stood up as they continued them at Beis, V'cholkum, and they divided them, V'nidim al Esra Rabba, and they made them into 24 groups, and they wrote their family names on a piece of paper, and Bolum V'nosnim B'kalpik. They mixed them up, because meaning they wrote their names in whatever nickname, however they wanted to identify them. They, instead of being 4, they divided each one into 6, and they wrote those names on this piece of papers. And Bolam and Nasim Makav, they mixed it up and they put it into a box, and they wrote, like we said, on all these 24 pieces of paper, the heads of those mishmaros that they had divided from those 4. Now, Bo Yedaya, so then the Mishmar of Yedaya, one of the representatives came, and he took his portion, and he took with his portion another 5 portions, another 5 pieces of paper, which was a total of 6. And whoever came up first was the first week, in the order of how he picked it up, one after the other. And that's how they would do their weeks, one after the other. Essentially what we're doing is we wanted to make those 4 into 24, so they split up each 4 into 6, and then they would have those consecutive weeks. And then Charim came and then he took his portion, and again with all his friends, making a total of 6. So that was for each one became now 6 mishmaros, and that's how they made the 24 mishmaros. And also, the prophets amongst them stipulated, and the Ger says, Shafil Yahayarov. Yahayarov, in the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, he was Rosh Mishmaros. He was the first of all the Mishmaros. Even if he'd be Oila, if he ultimately come up from the diaspora, Yitchi Yedaya Memkayma. Yedaya, who became now the new first Mishmar, he's not going to be pushed away from his place, because since in the beginning Yahayarov did not come, El Yedaya Ikar, rather, all the Mishmaros which were made from Yedaya come before the Avodah of Yahayarov, and they're primary. But Yahayarov Tafalai, and Yahayarov comes and does the Avodah after them, taking the place of the last of the Mishmaros of Yedaya, and because the 6 of Yedaya become 5, because we don't want to make more than 24 Mishmaros, but now that they came, they get the first Avodas, and everyone else is secondary to them. Now, it said in the Mishnah, we said that the Yisraelim, besides for those who went to Yerushalayim, because they lived in the area, they went up to be from the Anshe Mishmar, the rest of the Yisraelim would gather in their cities, and they would read from the Torah from where it talks about Bereshis. Now, says Imam Anani, where do we know this idea from? So he says like this: Ilmali mamodos, if not for the mamodos, which are the Yidden, they're engaged in the karbanos that the Yisraelim are making. If they didn't do mamodos, the Jewish people would be wiped out for their sins, because what are the mamodos? Are the Jews bringing their karbanos? So if there was no karbanos, so then the sins would not get atonement, and the Jews would be wiped out. If the Jews are wiped out, let the sky mishmai ba'aretz. So then heaven and earth, which is maintained in the merit of the Jews, would not stand either. Like it says the pasuk in Bereshis. It says, "Vayomer Avram said, Hashem lekim, Hashem God, what will I know that I'm going to inherit this land?" What was he essentially asking? So the Gemara explains, I'm Avram. Rebbeinu Shalom, master of the world. Maybe the Jews are going to sin in front of you. And I'll tell Islam, you know what you're going to do to them? Like the generation of flood, you wipe them out. You disperse them throughout. And once they're wiped out, so the world's not going to stand anymore. Hashem said to him, no, that's not what I'm going to do to the Jews. So Avram brings the Rebbeinu Shalom, master of the world. Let me know, with what will I inherit this land? So Malay said to him as follows: take from me 3 calves, beis mishaleshes, and 3 goats, etc., which he tells him all these different karbanos that he should bring, that Avram should have done. But again, since the concept of the mamadas is for the engagement of the karbanos, and that's what the world stands, because or else the Jews would be wiped out and then the heaven and earth would be wiped out. So that's why the Anshe Maimed in their cities, they read from Maisa Bereshis, because the whole Maisa Bereshis depends on this concept about the karbanos. So, but the conversation continues. Master of the world. This is all very good that you're telling me that you're not going to wipe out the Jews because they're going to bring the karbanos when the Beis Hamikdash is still around. But Avram knew that the Beis Hamikdash is going to be destroyed. When the Beis Hamikdash is not around anymore, what's going to be? And he said to him, and the Chavetz Chaim quotes this, Chavetz Chaim was very busy with learning to touch him. He says, Karatikanti lem say the karbanos. Says, I already organized, I already prepared for them to order the karbanos. Even when they just recite it in front of me, when you say karbanos before davening, malani alehem kilo ikudim lefana, I consider as if they sacrificed it in front of me. I'm going to forgive them for all their sins. That's the grace kite about saying karbanos, where it's mamish like they bringing the karbanos, and this is what's keeping up shemayim ba'aretz. But again, that's the explanation of what the why the Anshe Mishmar in their cities would read from Maisa Bereshis, because this is what keeps the shemayim ba'aretz. The terminal learn a brisa that when we talk about the Anshe Maimed, so Anshe Mishmar, which essentially what the Anshe Mishmar were in regards to the Yisraelim, are the Yisraelim who lived in Yerushalayim, and they would be present at the Hakravas HaKarbanos. So they were Hayu Mispal al Karban Achem. They davened for the karban of their brothers, I mean the rest of the Jewish people, which is the Talmud of every single day. Shizkapa B'ratzin, that it should be accepted, pleasing the Anshe Maimed, which those are the 24 groups that were in their cities. So like we said, that there were some who stayed home and they davened and they read and the Ma'aser Bereishis in their shuls, and the Yisraelim who were in the vicinity of Yerushalayim, they went up to be by the karbanos. So the Anshi Mishmer, they would go to the karban and daven. The Anshi Maimed and the people that stayed in their cities, they would go to shul, V'yishim Dal Taanis, and they would go and fast for 4 days out of the week. B'Sheni B'Shabbos, a work week. Monday, B'Shlishi, Tuesday, B'Revi, Wednesday, B'Chamishi, and on Thursday. Monday to Thursday. Now, when they fasted, what were they fasting for? So, B'Sheni on Mondays would be Al Yordei Hayam, would be for those who would go and travel on the seas. Why? Because, as we mentioned, every day was correlating to what was Ma'aser Bereishis. That's what the whole point of the Maimed is, because, like we said, if not for the Karbonis, which is the Maimed, Shemaim Ba'aretz wouldn't be around. So it goes to every day of Ma'aser Bereishis. On Monday, what does it say in the Torah on Yom Sheni? Was Yehida Ki B'Seich HaMayim. It was talking about the land and the sea, so you had to mention and appease for this idea about those who travel on the seas, because that's when the seas were made, because the land was separated from the water. B'Shlishi al Holchem Midbaris. On Tuesdays, they were daven for those who travel in the deserts, because it says on Tuesday, on Yom Shlishi, that the meaning on Monday was the Yehida Ki B'Seich HaMayim, was the separation of the upper waters and the lower waters. That was the waters, the sea, the world was covered in water. On the Yom Shlishi was that the land was visible, so that it should make it able to be traveled on, that no one should be harmed from wild animals. And so that's those who travel. Therefore, they would daven for them on Tuesday. But if on Wednesday, they would daven al askara, on this disease of askara, which is a type of a choking, constriction of the throat, so it shouldn't happen to the children, because on Yom Revi, the Ma'oros, the luminaries were put up into the galaxies, and it says, Yehi Ma'oros can be read Ma'aras, which is this curse of this choking. So therefore, that was on Wednesdays. And B'Chamishi, they daven on Thursday, al Ubros and Manikas, regarding the pregnant and the nursing women, because on Yom Chamishi, it said, Yishur to Hamayim Sheretz Nefesh Chayv, talking about the proliferation of teeming with offspring, that refers to pregnant and nursing women who are having children. Therefore, that's appropriate for all those Monday to Thursday to daven for those types of things. As the Gemara explains, Ubres, the pregnant women, they would daven Shlei Pila, that it should not miscarry, and it seems to be appropriate on Thursdays. And Menikas, and nursing women, Sheinikas B'neihem, that they should nurse their children, and they should be a healthy nursing. Now, B'Erev Shabbos l'hoy mesamen, on Friday they didn't fast. They covered the Shabbos because of the dignity of Shabbos. You don't want to come into Shabbos fasting. And Kavacham Shabbos on Shabbos itself they didn't fast. Now, but then the question is, Shabbos why on Sunday didn't they fast? So the Gemara brings a few interpretations. Amar Rabbi Yechon, he says because of the Nazarenes, which question who the Noitzim are, but their Yom Tov was on Sundays. So because of that, which Rashi doesn't tell us exactly what the reason is, elsewhere they give a reason that it might be dangerous if they actually fast on their holiday. But be that as it may, that was one reason. Shmuel ben Nachmani, he says because actually day 3 of the creation of man, because Adam was created on Yom Shishi, on Friday, and 3 days later is Sunday, Friday, Shabbat, Sunday. Every day 3 is always weak. Like it says, that when they did the Milah, Shlishi LaMilah, they were weak. So it sounds like 3 days after creation is also, it's day 3 is also a weakness, just like by Milah. So too it seems to be that from the creation, therefore there's a weakness on man on Sundays, and therefore it wouldn't be appropriate to fast. Shlakashama, he says the third interpretation, says the name Neshama Yisera, because of the extra soul that's taken away from a person after Shabbos, so therefore he's weaker. Like Rashi says, Neshama Yisera, there's an extra Neshama, which a well-known Rashi that he says, what does it mean Neshama Yisera? That a person has an expansion of consciousness for what? For eating and for drinking. Doesn't the Neshama Yisera somehow that it includes also the person's physical realm? It allows a person to eat more and drink more. That nitna by ba'adam Erev Shabbos. It's put into a person on Erev Shabbos. And Matzah Shabbos, night less men, but Matzah Shabbos, Everyone knows how they feel after Shabbos is over. It's like, Shabbos was able to be but then Matzah Shabbos is like the Shlomi is taken away. Shlomi says a famous pasuk, and Shlomi Shabbos v'yinafash. Now, although it means Hashem rested and He gave it a soul, but the way the Gemara interprets it is Kivin Sheshavas. Once a person went and he rested and he kept Shabbos, woe of the nefesh, v'yinafash, woe that we have lost that soul, and like a person feels upgeshlach, nocha Shabbos, and therefore a person can't fast on the Sundays. Those three interpretations why they didn't fast on the Mondays on Sunday. Now we said in the Mishnah that the laning would be according to the Ma'aseh Bereshis, but we said that they had more than one day of Kriya of that Ma'aseh Bereshis, so that it has the minimum psukim that could be laid for Kan Levim and Yisraelim. So the Mishnah said, on Sunday, on day one, Bereshis would be the Kiyah. They wouldn't read only Bereshis, which is from the first day of creation. They also read Vayihidikiyah, V'Seichamayim, which was splitting of the upper and the lower waters, which was day 2. So tell me, the Raisa that Bereshis B'Shnayim. The 2 aliyahs of Cain and Levi were from Yom Rishon of Ma'aseh Bereshis. Yidikiyah would be with one person. And so too we have explained from Rashi in the Mishnah, as this illustrates who would lane from what on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Essentially every day had another day or the next day with it when they laned. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Yehidikiyah be'echad. I understand how it's possible to have Yehidikiyah, the Shlishi, was with one person. Because plus some psukim, there's 3 psukim in that parsha of Yom Sheni, and it's enough with one person. And the Bereshis B'Shnayim, but you tell me that the first 2 aliyahs of Cain and Levi was from the day 1 of creation. Problem is, my timer, what's the reason? Hey psukim having, there's only 5 psukim in Yom Rishon. But now the Mishnah Masechet Megillah, it says, whoever's getting an aliyah by the Torah, Al Yifchas Megim Psukim, now do less than 3 psukim. So where do you get the minimum 9 aliyah, 9 psukim for the 3 aliyahs, when you have 5 and 3? This is 8. So, meaning, all the other one we had explained from Rashi in the Mishnah that he showed how each one, the bigger one would have 2 aliyahs, the smaller one would have 1, because you have to have those 3 psukim each. But here you only have a total of 8. So Rav Amar, he says, doilik. Now, whether you translate skip or repeat, the Beit that is made, the first one would lane 3 psukim. From Bereshis, Bara Likim, 3 psukim. The second aliyah would start with the last pasuk that the first aliyah had finished. And then he lanes 2 more psukim, makes for 3. And then the shlishi gets from the second day of creation of Yehidikiyah. As our Gemara is going to shortly tell us, that we're not allowed to leave over the parsha less than 3 psukim. Here we don't have the problem because it's not possible any other way. So therefore, he would repeat a pasuk, which Taisa points out, and we do the same thing in Rosh Chodesh. I know when Rosh Chodesh would say over, but he brings a question from Yehuda ben Nassan. He says, I don't understand. Why do you have to repeat a pasuk? Why don't you start earlier in the parsha? Shabbos Cholamoid, he says, we lane from Re'eh to Omer line, even though the primary parsha is only from Psalacha, because we want to get a certain amount of aliyahs in, so we add psukim from before. So why are you repeating? Just start earlier. Says Taisa, no. Over there we lane from Re'eh by Shabbos Cholamoid is because the parsha beforehand is also talking about the same idea. So it's one topic. But by Rosh Chodesh, beforehand is not talking about the same idea, so therefore we're not going to lane from it beforehand because it has no shaykhs, and therefore we're rather going to repeat a pasuk. And Tais says, and from here's a raya to our minig, which is a great question Tais asks, says, why don't we lane every single Shabbos the parsha of Shabbos like we do by Yom Tov? Where by Yom Tovim, we lane according to the Yom Tov that it is. So why don't you lane Ubiyam HaShabbos on Shabbos? Why don't you lane about Shabbos on Shabbos? Says Tais, you know what? Because the parsha of Shabbos does not have 3 psukim. And you can't say that you say from beforehand because it wouldn't be the same topic. That's why you don't learn about Shabbos. So, but as a Rav says you do. You'll take one of the psukim and you'll say it over. Shmuel Amma, he says no. He says paisik. What you do is you'll take the third pasuk and you split it in half. The first aliyah gets 2.5 psukim, and the Levi finishes off the second half of the pasuk, and then he lays 2 more psukim. So you'll have 2.5, 2.5, and 3. Says the Gemara, the Rab that says that you'll repeat a pasuk. Why doesn't it say they just stop in the middle? So you'll each get more than 2. They'll have essentially 3 each by doing a half. Somebody else, no, any pasuk, and Moshe Rabbeinu didn't stop, and I'm not pasuk, like we can't stop over there. You have to do a full pasuk. Says Gemara, yeah, you're right. There's Shmuel on the pasuk. How does Shmuel say that you stop? Well, me paskin, do you really stop in the middle of the pasuk? Who was a Baal Mikra, he was very well versed in the text, and he was proficient in the Taimei Hakra. He said, "Sar gadol hayili." It's Reb Chanina gadol. He says it was very difficult for me, and I went back to him again and again that he should permit for me to take and split a pasuk into two by Reb Chanina gadol, and and he didn't allow me to split up a pasuk. Only when I'm teaching to the school children. Since it's only being done for learning, because they can't read the whole pasuk, it's only then he left for an aliyah. You can't split it in half. So Shmuel is saying that you do a half of a pasuk. Says the Gemara, yeah, Shmuel, he's going to tell you from there. Hasam over there by the school children. Time of mine, what's the reason in Cheder that he let the Rebbe split it in half? It's not possible. They wouldn't be able to learn the whole pasuk at once. Hachanami, he also by the Sefer Torah regarding skipping a pasuk, lo yafshir. Shmuel doesn't hold it's possible to repeat a pasuk. So therefore, it's not possible, just like the Rebbe, and therefore you could split it in half. But says the Gemara, Shmuel Pasik, he says you split the pasuk in half. Why doesn't he say that you repeat it? Why? Why is that not an option? We asked Rav. Rav said, no, he can't hold like Shmuel because he can't split a pasuk. Shmuel says you split a pasuk. Why? Why can't you repeat a pasuk? Says the Gemara, this is a concern regarding those who are entering, which is, if the second aliyah is going to repeat a pasuk from the first aliyah, and he's going to start from that pasuk, someone's going to come in late to davening. He didn't hear the first aliyah. He's going to think, wait a second, the first aliyah only got 2 psukim. And that's going to create a churva because people are going to think that for an aliyah, it's enough to have 2 psukim. And so to Gzeir Mishum HaYetzin, it's also a decree because of those who leave, meaning when the first one gets length 3 psukim, he's only leaving over for the Pasha Bereshis 2 psukim. So you have a concern for those who are leaving early because he's going to think, oh, obviously Levi's getting only 2 psukim. So there says Shmuel, no, you can't repeat a pasuk because if someone who's coming late or someone who's leaving early, he's going to think that, okay, must be an aliyah, it could be even 2 psukim, which is incorrect. And therefore, to avoid that, we can't repeat a pasuk. Rather, we'll split that pasuk in half. But the Gemara asks Mesa. The Gemara asks for the following brisa.
Half a pasuk is considered a pasuk, and need 3 psukim. So.
Right. But if I guess you don't have the problem of kapsugi le pasuk Moshe, so it's a pasuk. Not the ganze pasuk, but it's a third pasuk. So so that would be enough. The Gemara says Mesa. The Gemara asks for the following brisa. Brisa says Parsha shel shisha psukim, which this is going on any other day of the year. You have a parsha that has 6 psukim. So according to Mishnah, so that parsha you could read with two aliyahs because each one will get 3. V'shachamishin, but let's say there's a parsha that has only 5 psukim, so Yipiyach obviously has to be with one aliyah. V'ema rishon kurdi gimel. Now, if let's say the first aliyah didn't read all 5 psukim, he only read 3 of the psukim. So Hashemi, what does the second aliyah do? Kurdi shnei mi parsha zu, so he reads 2 psukim from this parsha. V'echem mi parsha acheres, and he'll have to have 3 psukim. He'll read 1 pasuk from the next parsha. V'yasham, some say no, he needs gimel. He's going to have to read 3 psukim from the next parsha. Why? Because you cannot start in a parsha less than 3 psukim because someone who comes late is going to see that you only did 1 pasuk from this parsha, thinking the guy only got one. So no, can't start less than 3. Fine. But upon them, the Gemara asks on both opinions that we said up until now. According to the one that says you could repeat a pasuk, what do you mean lidlik? What's the problem? You said that there was 5 psukim. The first aliyah read 3. So you're having a whole Torah. What should this guy do now? The second aliyah, 2 psukim left. Should he do 1 pasuk from the next parsha, 3 psukim from the next parsha? Just repeat over the pasuk that he said. Lidlik. According to Shmuel, who said you can split a pasuk in half. So lifsik. Let him split in half. In other words, that when you have a parsha of 5 psukim, why does the second aliyah read 3 psukim from the other parsha? Either repeat or split in half. Says Gemara, Shami Hasan. There it's different because there's a Ketantam of Chazan Aleph. This lay Ravcha, where there's space. You could read from another parsha, but over here there's no space because you cannot read from another day of Ma'aser Bereshis. You only have Beresha v'Hirikiya, and therefore we said that you're stuck essentially because the Hirikiya is already 3 psukim. That's Shlishi. and you have only 5 psukim to work with, you can't expand into anywhere else. It would create too much of you'd be a few days later, my separation, that would be too much. And there's no earlier than that because that's where the Torah begins. So that's what we said, that either repeat or split in half. But yeah, of course, if you have that option, then you're going to go further into the next parsha. Thank you for any time.